with the high levels of crime, gender-based violence and corruption in the country, we ask the question, has South Africa lost its moral fibre? Or better yet, have we failed to harness the moral wealth of this nation and the consciousness in our society? Here to unpack this, I'm joined by cultural activist Dr. Nomagugu Ngobese, Congress of Traditional Leaders of South Africa, Secretary General Zolani Mkiva, and the General Secretary of the Evangelical Alliance of South Africa, Rev Moss Ntlha. You can be a part of the conversation tonight by sending us your questions and comments, 072-110-5584, or you can tweet us tonight at Newzroom 405. Good evening, gentlemen, and Dr. Nomagugu, and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. Let's start with you, Dr. Nomagugu, joining us on the line. I mean, that question broadly it speaks to whether or not the project that was started in the early 2000s of moral regeneration has failed. Key to this program was the fact that we wanted to come up with a charter of positive values that we could share amongst society and be able to then harness some kind of moral wealth in the nation that would help us eradicate the ills that we saw in the nation. If we look back at that program, where it started and where we are today, and the kind of ills that still exist in society, can we say we have failed?
Yes, we have failed dismally. People, I think I'm reminding them that since 1994, the input of all these policies and the human rights, which are not human, to me, they are so individual with their approach, and the policies that emphasized that even our children have rights from home, and all the policies of abortion, pregnancy in schools, it's government who did all those things. And people are here, they will agree with me, even abortion at the age of 12, without the parents' consent, has played a crucial role in furthering this social illness that we are seeing today. Even gender-based violence is coming from all those rights where some girls and some boys, they just go and have their own affair in a umxhaso, you know, these houses that the government is building for the people, saying that the people are poor, but they are not poor. We've got our norms and values that we had before 1994, but they were criticized dismally by them. And today, they are crying unfold that South Africa is swimming in the pool of crime. And crime is not even from their youth, it is from up there in the government. There's a lot of fraudulence, and I'm asking myself, I asked them one time when we were having a meeting in Joburg, why they are talking about moral regeneration. What has happened now that they are imposing this moral regeneration? And they did not come with the answer. In fact, they didn't like that question at all, because you must know the roots of crime. Then you can start there. Then you'll help the society. You'll help the youth, everybody. But looking at it, this moral regeneration thing has failed dismally, as much as it is very closely. They talk about morals, and whose morals are they talking about? Because we as indigenous people, we had our own way of upbringing our children, our own way of dealing with social issues in our families. But all those things were discarded as if they are non-existing. Yeah. People must move with the times. And I mean, I must say it because I've been fighting for this. I was fighting for young people to have these morals that we had.
Yes.
Puberty rituals.
Yes.
And everything that make a boy a man.
Yes.
Make a girl a woman.
Yes.
But all those things were discarded. And they are using that. People are poor. I mean, we look at tenders, how they manipulate the people because of tenders, like condoms. There are many tenders about condoms. There's a lot of things that's going.
We're gonna come back, Dr. Ngobese, to look a little bit further into those values and ethics that we should be aspiring to. But Your Royal Highness, let me bring you in here. I mean, what is your feeling around the rationale with the policies that are in place? For example, around human rights, around sexual reproductive rights, around all sorts of these policies, and whether or not they are on a colliding course with a nation that is able to harness its moral wealth.
Well, thank you for that important question. But let me start off by saying, Mhlekazi, that we can't afford to look into the issue of morality in the country in isolation. We ought to link it to the broader scheme of things and the factors that are driving the social fabric of our country and the social wealth, as you put it, so that we put it in its proper context. So in terms of the policy direction of the country, we've got very good progressive policies that we have in the main. And then I would be in agreement with the Speaker that there are policies which are undoing what we are trying to do of ensuring that there's moral regeneration in the country. And those policies, they go right against what we are trying to do. Because what we need to do as a country, the basic unit of our society, which is the family, needs to be empowered by laws that actually put the centrality of their role in ensuring that we bring up our children under the values of Ubuntu and under the values of Africanity. But if we come up with policies that destroy the very basic unit of the family structure, then we're going to have all sorts of problems. I'm saying that simply because we cannot outsource the role of ensuring that we teach and harness our children to follow a particular way of living. We can't outsource that to government, but government must champion morality, especially the highest office in the land, and give a clear direction of what needs to be happening. But that needs to be supported by strong families that are ensuring that children and members of the family are steered in a right direction so that they are not drifting. So what has happened in our country, if I may make one example, which has really created disorder in some families, particularly from the poor areas. If you put up a law that says that when you issue a grant, as an example, I'll use that good example. There are worse examples which the latter speaker has spoken about. And you give that grant directly to a dependent who still depends to the parents. So what you are doing there, you are creating a crack in that family between the parents and the children in terms of how resources are managed. And once you do that, you are then opening a can of worms for many things to happen. And this is what has happened. If you go to many rural areas, children have become very ill-disciplined because they think that they are not accountable to their parents given what is happening. So a policy ought to be linked to the social fabric of the people and the design of the living. You can't do a policy that is going to contradict the cultural outlook of the people, because what you will do in earnest, you are going to create subcultures. Yeah. And once you have subcultures which are of disobedience, and anarchy is going to be then created. And the whole range of things then that are linked to moral degeneration are going to occur. Yeah. So I'm saying that we must ensure that the centrality of the policy making does not contradict our cultural outlook, particularly where there are good values which are espoused.
We'll come back to that. Distortion of a line of accountability brought in by policy directions that indirectly are in collusion with the cultural values that we aspire to. But what else are they in conflict with as we continue next? Do stay with us and let's get your views tonight on 072-110-5584. You can tweet us as well at Newzroom 405. In Focus continues shortly. Welcome back. Live with us tonight on In Focus, your Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405. The question we asked tonight, have we failed to harness the moral wealth of our nation? This is because of the many ills we are seeing in society. Crime, getting out of control, gender-based violence, corruption at the highest levels of governance in South Africa. What has happened to the moral fiber of the nation? I thought let's put around together some thinkers in culture and some thinkers in faith as well to give us their views. Rev, good evening and thank you very much for your time. So we set out in the 2000, I think it was in 2008 when a charter of positive values was established. We said, here's the outcome. We want to develop a society with ethical values driven by leadership. We want to promote safer schools, for example. We want to get community leaders and structures involved in social issues and addressing these social issues. And here is a charter. Here's the Bill of Rights. All these things are going to direct us and address the abuse of any kind in society, be it racism, be it xenophobia, and so on and so forth. Why have we failed to have these programmable in our day-to-day living and being implemented?
If I may, okay.
Let me weigh in there. I think that you are right. I think we have failed. We have failed at every level. We failed at a leadership level, and we have a good report from the Zondo Commission that has just been tabled, which lists all of our many, many crimes from the highest level, as you say. So from the leadership, I think there's this way in which you can say that our failure is a leadership issue. I think all of us and our society is crying out for leadership. Leadership is that thing that would inspire a whole population to aspire toward the common good. And I think that's what you don't have. You don't have it at the government level, and we have Zondo's commission report to confirm that. We don't have it at the local government level. We don't have it at the number of institutions. We don't have it in business. Corruption is never government alone. It is also business partners that are actually participating in that. And therefore, it does cascade downwards to ordinary people on the street. So we do have a crisis of leadership in our country. And as has been said, I think that leadership, to the degree that it is we look toward that leadership for policy formulations, we are going to have the same problem that Zolani has referred to, where you have leadership that comes up with policies that are disconnected from ordinary life on the ground. So you have unintended consequences or effects of policies that are meant to address the questions of the poor, but they do cause other unintended outcomes as well. And so it's actually a very big problem. And as a person of faith, I have a particular view that says this whole reconstruction project that we've embarked upon as a nation, we've done something quite remarkable since 1994. We've tried to reinvent ourselves from the ruins of apartheid. We've tried to rebuild a new society. And one of the first things we did when we started on that journey was to ask God to leave the room, in a sense that and this is God in a very broad sense. In other words, whether you're a Muslim, whether you are an African traditionalist, or whether you are a Christian, we have simply accepted to go with a consensus that says we will do this ourselves. We will frame these policies without any reference outside of ourselves. And that opens the door to self-interest of all sorts. And so, in a sense, I suppose we have to accept that that's democracy and that's how it works. But if we at least start with the definition of the problem by recognizing that in cutting ourselves from the creator, from the source of all life, from the source of all wisdom, we have been left alone in this sea and trying to find our moral compass. It's going to be difficult.
Is a booklet, Rev, before I bring you back, Zolani, is a booklet enough? We say we've got this booklet. Is that enough to give us the direction that we require?
I take it that by the booklet you mean the moral regeneration booklet we came up with in the early years of our democracy?
Yes.
You know, I participated in several meetings in the formulation of that booklet, and I think that even in that booklet, we sort of talked at some level about revolutionary morality, which in the end it's no morality at all, because you get all sorts of revolutionaries who have been unmasked by the Zondo Commission to be not revolutionary enough, in fact, to be counter-revolutionary. So in a sense, I don't know if we can count on those policies in a way that disconnects them from their roots, and I think all of us in this country, the majority at any rate, would say that their moral values are drawn from their sense of who the creator is, or the role of the creator in the normal run of history. That is not to say, obviously, that people who have no faith at all, who are atheists, cannot be ethical agents in society. They can be. But I think the large majority, not only in this country, but across the continent, we are a religious, spiritual continent. But yet you wouldn't realize that if you looked at all of the major indicators of what a good life would look like. Yeah. So we fail in a large measure because, and I think this is often borne out even by other disciplines, that the failure in Africa is a leadership problem to a large extent.
All right, let's come back to that ethical agents in a moment. But Zolani, let me bring you back. I mean, you're saying we ended up coming up with policies that were directly the opposite of what cultural values we need to be aspiring to. In a sense, then we then misdirected the allocation of accountability, for example, on something like grants. Where was society? Where were we? We were sitting watching this happen, and what did we say?
Well, you see, Thabo, giving grants to the poor is a very good policy. What is wrong is the policy implementation, on how that policy gets implemented, because it begins to go against exactly what we're trying to achieve. It creates a very big problem going forward, whilst it solves some short-term goals on the one hand. So what we must do, as the good colleague is talking about the issue of leadership and where we are found wanting as a country, is when we do policies, we need to pay much attention to the detail. You see, one of the things that the colonialist and the apartheid structure mastered was paying attention to the detail on how to repress and oppress us. So what we need to do in order to reverse the damage and the erosion which has been created by apartheid and colonization is to pay attention to detail as we begin to address the historical imbalances. And one of the things that we must do, as I said initially, that we can't delink this issue of moral regeneration from the broader scheme of things. We need to deal with the issue of the total emancipation of the African majority in South Africa. Because people ought to be, conscientized, to be patriotic, there must be a sense of ownership of the country. You can't afford to have citizens who go all out to destroy public institutions, especially of education and health, where our children benefit. It tells you that there is something wrong, and I think, as my colleague has pointed out, it is a leadership issue. There's a leadership vacuum. We must have leaders that are selfless, and leaders that love people, and leaders that work to help the poor, to help the citizenry, to get out of the quagmire of poverty and unemployment. In that way, if you have selfless leaders, that must ensure that there is economic liberation in the country, that the economy of South Africa, that the land mass of South Africa cannot remain squarely in the hands of the few people who happen to be a people of European origin. That creates a problem because, on the one hand, you have the South African population, which is highly politically aware because of the liberation struggle that has ensured that it educated the masses of their people in terms of their rights. But what we have done in the new South Africa, we have not really been able to strike a balance between those rights and responsibility. And again, the issue of the lack of ownership of the country is a big problem for us. Unless we address that broader issue, we will never achieve the issue of moral regeneration. So I'm saying that, as I indicated, it is located in the highest office of the land. I wouldn't say that we've completely failed, because I believe it is not only the role of government to deal with this mess. In fact, the government can be expected to mobilize society. It is the role of the civil society, the churches, and the NGOs, as well as the institutional traditional leadership itself, business and labor. All of us, we must put our hands on the deck to ensure that we steer our country in the right direction. So I'm going
to come back to that in a moment, and I want us to go a little bit deeper, but we'll bring in Dr. Nomagugu as well on this, because she raises that similar question to say, when issues around the moral wealth of the nation were raised, they said, no, people are poor. So I was saying that people are poor, and when people are poor, until people are able to be socially advancing, we cannot talk about a moral regeneration. Is that what we are saying? What are your views tonight? 072-110-5584, or you can tweet us at Newzroom 405. We'll come back to that in a moment. Welcome back live with us tonight on In Focus, Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. It's a concern, it's a growing concern when we're seeing ills in society. Deputy principals being gunned down at the gates of premises of the schools, young children being mutilated, being raped, elderly people being raped. These are questions that are beginning to rise in society. Say, have we failed to harness the moral wealth of this nation? And what has happened with the programs that we have put in place, things like the Moral Regeneration Program? Have they not been adequately implemented, or are they a futile tool in dealing with these challenges? Dr. Nomagugu, the question that I was posing earlier on is to say, are we saying until we have dealt with the social issues of land, social issues of employment, social issues of education, we mustn't expect the country to have common values. We mustn't expect the country to behave in a particular way that seeks to eradicate the ills of society?
The problem that I'm facing is they are talking about whose values are they talking about, because fundamentally the family institution, which is the primary institution of any person, is having this that we call educating Ubuntu to the young and to be responsible adults at the end. But the imposition of all these policies, they are running away, where people are told to do things that are not according to what they live, especially we as indigenous people of this country. There is a lot that has been going around, and as a result, the consequences are escalating now. Now, when they are failing to do all these policies that they implemented, they go back to us. They say the society has failed, the church has failed, but we are not together with the government, where they are making these laws and call us so that we meet together and we do things that everybody will be happy in raising our own kids. Because what I fear most is our kids which are being exposed to all these fatalities. And there's a lot even in the curriculum of the school. You cannot tell me that your child, when going to school, forget about what the mom and dad has said. There is condom in schools. And there are life offenders. There is abortion, there is teenage pregnancy, which has been, we have been talking about this, but the government did not want to listen to us because we are behind the schedule. And I always say, culture is not it's static. It doesn't change. Because if you change culture, you're losing your identity. South Africa is running on the identity crisis. Everybody is watching that. We can put glossy words and whatever. But the problem is going back to the roots. Renaissance in South Africa did not function at all. It was all about money. I've been here. I'm 65 years now. I've been trying by all means to talk that let us go back so that we take the good things that we had and we are having right now. We are still having those things, but the government don't want to accept them because they want us to be black, to be yellow, or peach. We change our colors. They deserve, they deserve to come back and apologize to the indigenous people of this country because destruction has been made, and it has been made. That indigenous people are weeping today, and until they humble themselves and they go down and negotiate with the people that they look down upon because they are not educated, they are whatever. South Africa, we are grieving, I must say it. So I cannot now, after a very good work that we are doing at the grassroots level, we don't even get anything to help us to move forward because we are doing things that are required.
Talk to us about that. What is the moral activism that is happening on the ground, right? We spoke, for example, of something called moral activists. Rev Moss Ntlha speaking of ethical agents. What are the ethical agents doing on the ground, and is their impact being felt, Dr. Nomagugu?
We've been working a lot when we are doing virginity inspection to minimize the teenage pregnancy. And always when they are talking about statistics of HIV, AIDS, all that stuff, and I ask them, how about there are lots of girls who are abstaining from sex? And abstinence is not even there now when they're teaching about HIV, AIDS. So to me, it brings that loneliness of the indigenous people when what they are doing, helping boys to in workshops. We do this freely because no one is looking at us. I've been talking a lot when I was still in the Premier's office, saying, how about boys? There are no workshops for boys. There's no love about boys, but there's prison about boys. There's a lot that has been going around. We are looking at it because no one is accepting what people in the grassroots are doing and are saying. So we must go back. Let us involve everybody when people are doing these policies. We cannot live in the policies of the West. And it's not even West, it's typical. It's typical. It's typical. It's so unfair. It's so unfair. People can put jam, they can put rama so that it looks closely. And we are grieving about our kids and about the papers. You know, a paper cannot make a man. But teaching a person, and I always say the written text is not stronger than the spoken word.
Yes.
Because it's who we are. We start from spoken word. The school is a second institution of the life of any person.
Right.
And it's a church whatever. And everybody is groomed at home, which is the first institution. They must empower the first institution. They must not impose, because most of the parents were imprisoned by their kids and they reprimand them. We suffocated. And here are the papers. A lot of papers in South Africa that they think people will adhere to them. The people cannot adhere to the papers, but people must be, they must,
right.
we must talk.
Okay, Dr. Ngobese is saying we must talk, have dialogue, and share ideas. Rev, it seems to me that there is work being done, but it's being done in isolation. So when you speak of ethical agents, or when we speak of moral activists in communities, there is work in various structures that is being done in isolation. But that fact that it's being done in isolation means that it's not being felt where it needs to be felt with greater impact.
Correct. I think that is so true. We have a history in this country of mass movements that succeeded in overthrowing, for example, apartheid. You know, we used to have something called the mass democratic movement that mobilized the whole of society towards a common goal. And so you do have ethical agency from the bottom up that acts in ways that transforms our society to a better future for all. Similarly, even in our day today, there are social movements that mobilize across the board. A movement, for example, like Defend Our Democracy, is a movement of ordinary people that seeks to make the claim that this democracy ought to answer to all of us together. All of us must ensure that we do all that we can in order for this democracy to deliver the promises that we made to each other in 1994. And of course, it isn't. And I would agree with the Dr. Nomagugu that there's a case to be made of the fact that our democracy is very much influenced by the West, more than by the African majority. That is a fact. I don't think anyone can dispute that. But I think that we shouldn't abandon the idea of constantly pressing for such reforms, and the constitutional reform process is an ongoing process. There's a law reform process that is going on that continues to try to recalibrate our constitution and our social order in ways that answers to the broader society. And so there is no reason to despair. I just think that 27 years after our democracy, we can't give up. We ought to continue that agency from ordinary people, continue organizing ourselves in ways that count from every village, every township, every suburb, so that there is a way in which ordinary people take more important role in shaping the society we get. I don't think that we should ever allow ourselves to be in a place where the political elite have a blank check from the rest of the society. That is not democracy. That is a dictatorship. And that happens only to the extent that we are not organized as we should be, and not taking the hard organizational task to defeat all of the evils that we identify in our society today, whether it's poverty, whether it's gender-based violence, whether it is xenophobia, whether it is racism. All of those can be defeated. It all calls for leadership. It all calls for organization. And I think that if there is failure at all, it is a failure to organize our people into ways of action that builds hope, that nurtures hope, that starts a chain reaction of hope, so that we get to the better society that we want. I think it is already happening in different pockets. It is not coordinated, but there is hopeful signs in every village, every community. Even among the farming community in this country, there are amazing stories of farmers who are very involved in actually doing good and sharing the land that historically colonization has given to them. They are beginning to sow back into the community and saying, what can we do together to build a better society? So I think there is hope. I think what is lacking is a coordination of these hopeful actions from everywhere.
Yeah. What would you advocate for? What would we need to do to build a better society for all of us with a better bowl of fiber? Let's hear your views next. 072-110-5584. Tweet us at Newzroom405. The conversation continues. We're back with you in a moment. Welcome back. Live with us tonight on In Focus, cultural activist Dr. Nomagugu, Ngobese, Congress of Traditional Leaders, General Secretary Zolani Mkiva. We also have with us the General Secretary of the Evangelical Alliance of South Africa, Rev Moss Ntlha. Mhlekazi, I understand, and we're all in agreement that, yes, we need to get our economy right. We need to eradicate poverty, and we need to deal with unemployment and so on and so forth. Are we saying that until we have dealt with these things, we will then have to park the question of moral regeneration?
Well, I am saying that we need to do this simultaneously. We can't say we're going to deal with the issue of morality, not having dealt with the basics, because the issue of dealing with the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment are very key for the country. And they should be prefaced by the fact that there needs to be a clear policy perspective of the restoration of the land from the minority to the majority. Of course, with every South African having access to land. And then coupled with that, there has to be a meaningful participation of the African majority into the economy of the country. You can't have the majority being reduced only to mere consumers in their own country of origin. Basically, the African majority is technically sub-citizens of South Africa until we reach a point wherein we've transformed the economy of South Africa. And it needs to be done, and done as quickly as we can, because people are losing patience. And they are losing patience because they see leaders at each other's throat, and therefore we have leadership that is defocused from a responsibility of ensuring that they steer the country in the right direction. So we are saying that if you've got leaders who take that posture, they are then reducing themselves to dealers rather than leaders. So we must, as a people, therefore demand that there has to be changes in terms of how the country is administered. We must ensure that there is clear accountability on the part of leadership. And once you have leadership that is accountability will cascade down. It will move both ways for that matter. So I'm saying there is that. And secondly, the public discourse ought also to be influenced in terms of ensuring that our people are patriotic. What happens in the public media, particularly radio and TV, what is getting transmitted must ensure that it is helping us as a country to conscientize a high degree of responsibility, that our people must be educated about the importance of embracing our Africanity. And that must really be showcased on television rather than having a programming which is clearly taking us into the wrong direction. If you look at the content entailed in the soapies, it's really pumping the notion of violence, which begots violence. So if you look at all those soapies and the stories, they're not helping us. And what Dr. Nomagugu was saying is that some of the policies are beginning to promote things that are really Eurocentric and anti-African. So we need to change that narrative and begin to put positive stories on the national television, positive stories on the national radio, so that we ensure that as we talk about educating the people about moral regeneration, that also manifests on television, whether it's Generation or The Queen or whichever soapy that you have for that matter. But we must not promote violence. We know that already we are quite a very violent society, and that is informed by the history that we come from. So we must pay attention to the detail of what is transmitted without necessarily censoring what is being produced by those that are creating.
And that's a real challenge there, what you've just touched upon now, because we sit and we say, we are looking at the values that are espoused by our leadership. At some point, we had agreed, now we want to promote good leadership and values that come from our leadership. And people today will tell you that there is very little of that. In fact, many of them will tell you that there's nothing that is in our leaders that we look up to, that we want to emulate. Actually, it's not something that we want to promote. Then you go to the leaders themselves. For example, you talk about things like violence, and they say what you've just said now. Yeah, but we are just generally a violent society. It's not our leadership. It's just the society.